Here is Immortal Moments for explanation. Friends, like videos and subscribes to our channel. Martial Universe Season 10 Part 28 Explanation. So let's start our explanation. Lin Dong suddenly realized that all the noise in his surroundings completely disappeared the moment he plunged into the dragon transformation pool. In fact, his vision became completely dark. With a grab of his hand, all he could feel was the viscous black water brushing past his hand. Lin Dong's heart also tensed up at this moment. As his senses quietened down, he realized that there were waves of indescribably wild and violent energy wildly sweeping towards him. Puff! A soft sound appeared and Lin Dong's shirt was instantly turned into dust. Black viscous water were just like muddy layers of soil, as they wrapped around his body. Sizzle sizzle. As if he could hear a deafening sound, waves of exceptionally dark energy began to surge forth before they tunneled into his body through every pore. An intense pain immediately followed. Lin Dong's body tensed up. His green veins bulged and wiggled like dragons on the surface of his skin. Meanwhile, his throat emitted a painful low roar as the black energy swarmed into his body like blades. In fact, it left a mess wherever it passed, and even his meridians were severed, leaving his entire body covered with injuries. However, the target of this energy was not his meridians or organs. Instead, it was his bones. The black energy climbed over his bones. Subsequently, Lin Dong felt as if his bones were tightly gripped by countless large hands. In fact, he was even able to hear clear cracking noises being emitted from his bones. The intense pain resulting from his bones being shattered spread across Lin Dong's body while waves of throbbing pain attacked his heart. His body twitched intensely at the moment, while his throat let out a low roar, and he appeared just like a roaring wild beast. In fact, traces of blood began to surge from within his jet black eyes. Only at this moment did Lin Dong understand why Du and Dao had a lingering fear towards this dragon transformation pool. This pain was indeed sufficient to cause one to lose one's mind. Lin Dong, since you do not possess a genuine set of dragon bones, the energy present in this dragon transformation pool will shatter the bones in your body an inch at a time, before they remold them. It is an extremely dangerous process. If you are unable to endure it, you will likely end up becoming part of the energy here. Yang's solemn voice sounded. Clearly, he knew that Lin Dong was currently in a dangerous situation. At this moment, Lin Dong was bitterly enduring the assault from that terrifying and intense pain. Hence, he was in no mood to reply Yang. All he could do was to hoarsely reply in his heart. Crack! Another deafening sound was emitted from within Lin Dong's body. He could sense that the bones within his body were being widely shattered by the black energy lingering over it an inch at a time. Being able to clearly experience one's bones shattering, this sensation truly pushed one to the edge. However, Lin Dong bitterly clenched his teeth with blood-red eyes. In fact, there was even a trace of blood seeping out from the corner of his mouth. Nonetheless, it was clear that he did not intend to give up. Over all these years, Lin Dong clearly understood that one must pay a price in order to obtain strength. This was an exchange because there was no free lunch in this world. Waves of intense pain assaulted Lin Dong's consciousness. Meanwhile, the bones in his body became increasingly fragile with the flow of time. Tiny cracks covered his dense white bones and broke down its tough exterior. Bang! The shattering of his bones lasted for a whole hour. After which, Lin Dong's body convulsed intensely while a muffled sound was being emitted from within his body. After which, his body softened and collapsed. It turns out that the bones within his body were completely broken down. Buzz! A vast and mighty black energy surged over, while the bones within Lin Dong's body were about to collapse and formed a huge vortex around him. Following which, black energy continuously tunneled into Lin Dong's body. Something mysterious occurred the moment the black energy tunneled into Lin Dong's limp body. In fact, one could see the liquid-like black energy slowly distorting, before they finally formed an extremely complicated sequence and flowed across Lin Dong's body. As it flowed, the black energy also slowly solidified and vaguely seemed to take the form of a human skeleton, which was exactly the same as before. However, it was substantially different. Waves after waves of majestic black energy continuously tunneled into Lin Dong's body. Finally, they merged with his gradually solidifying black bones. The process of rebuilding his bones was a rather time-consuming task. 5 days passed before it finally came to an end. After which, the black bones within Lin Dong's body were completely solidified. His newly formed black bones flickered with a metallic luster. Light flowed over his bones, giving them a relatively mysterious appearance. At these dragon bones, Lin Dong gently clenched his fist as he felt the frightening strength hidden within his body. Immediately, joy raced through his heart. His suffering had been worthwhile. Your bones are merely ordinary dragon bones. How much it will be strengthened will depend on what happens next. However, the energy present in this place is a little resistant towards you. Therefore, perhaps, it would not be an easy task for you to absorb them. In that case, your dragon bones will not be strengthened by a major extent. Yang said. Resistance? Lin Dong laughed in his heart upon hearing this. In that case, I will have to do it by force. You plan to use the devouring ancestral symbol? Yang asked in shock. To begin with, the energy in this place was extremely intense. Just absorbing it normally would bring one's body tremendous pain. Just how intense would the pain be if Lin Dong was to use his devouring ancestral symbol to forcefully devour them? This is my only opportunity to enter the dragon transformation pool. Since I have finally made it here, I will naturally not be satisfied with an ordinary set of dragon bones. Lin Dong chuckled. You are truly crazy. Yang sighed and replied. Otherwise, how can I possibly compete with the Ice Master? All of you have always held my potential with high regards. However, I am well aware of my own capabilities. Therefore, if I do not risk my life, wouldn't I simply end up as a joke? Lin Dong paused for a moment. His voice was somewhat hoarse as he replied. Yang was stunned. A short while later, he finally replied, You can be rest assured that I will help you. Lin Dong smiled, but he did not speak further. Slowly opening both his eyes, he realized that everything around him was dark. In fact, his mental energy perception was completely useless in this dragon transformation pool. After all, each time his mental energy reached out to probe his surroundings, those wild and violet energies would surge over and dissipate his mental energy. Devouring ancestral symbol, time to come out. Lin Dong softly muttered. Promptly, a deep black light slowly began to spread from within his body, before they transformed into a huge circular black hole behind him. Meanwhile, Lin Dong was seated within this black hole. Although it was also black in color, the black light from the devouring ancestral symbol was far deeper and purer, when compared to the darkness within the dragon transformation pool. Devour. A soft voice was emitted from Lin Dong's lips. In the next moment, the black hole began to slowly rotate. Waves of incomparably domineering devouring power were released. Splash! Following the release of the devouring power, an unusual commotion immediately erupted in the lake. The strange silence from before was broken instantly. The pool water vortexed, transforming into many black streams that flowed into that black vortex. Finally, they poured into Lin Dong's body. Humph! When those icy cold blade-like black water currents flowed into Lin Dong's body, his body began to tremble intensely. At this moment, it seemed as though his flesh was being sliced off a piece at a time. Meanwhile, a muffled sound was being emitted from his throat. Black energy surged onto Lin Dong's body. Finally, it barbarically broke through the hindrance from his veins and gathered above his black bones, causing the color of his metallic bones to deepen. An indescribable intense pain attacked Lin Dong's mind at this moment. Even with Lin Dong's determination, he still felt a giddiness surging within his mind at this moment. However, soon after, he pressed his mouth shut and forced himself to stay awake. After all, he knew that if he was to lose consciousness, the energy would rip his body apart and turn him into pure energy in the dragon transformation pool. Raw? Resplendent green light rose on Lin Dong's body at this moment. The green light gathered and transformed into an enormous green dragon-like figure that crouched behind him. As the color of Lindong's bones became increasingly darker, the green dragon behind him also seemed to have become increasingly lifelike. Green dragon scales flickered and appeared as though they were alive. An actual pressure quietly spread at this moment. Time slowly passed in an extremely dull fashion in this dark dragon transformation pool. 10 days passed by unknowingly. During these 10 days, Lindong's body was constantly in a state of convulsion. In fact, that intense pain caused his body to turn numb. Veins bulged on his skin as if they were about to break free from it. The green dragon crouching behind him was also becoming increasingly clear. In fact, it was even possible to sense its hot dragon's breath, and it looked as though this green dragon was alive. If one was to probe deep into Lindong's body at this moment, one would discover that the bones within his body were already jet black. However, there was an indestructible toughness under this blackness. At this moment, Lindong's bones were already extremely powerful. In fact, they were several times more powerful as compared to before he entered the dragon transformation pool. There were generally two things that the dragon tribe took pride in: their bloodline and physical body. Disregarding their bloodline, their physical body was supported by their bones. Hence, Lindong currently possessed an actual physical body that was comparable to the dragon tribe. This was his ultimate dream from a long time ago, when he first obtained his green heaven materialized dragon skill. At this moment, he had finally managed to accomplish it. Your dragon bones should have reached the strength of a top-grade dragon bone. Not bad, Yang said. Top-grade dragon bone, huh? That is still not good enough. Lindong opened his eyes. There was a wild heated ambition surging within his black eyes. You want the ancient dragon bone? Yang was slightly startled as he exclaimed in shock. Since I have came down to the dragon transformation pool, I naturally want the very best. Lindong smiled. Promptly, a thought passed through his mind. Immediately, the black hole vortex above him began to rotate rapidly before a frightening devouring power swept forth, creating huge waves in this quiet dragon transformation pool. Darkness surged. Even the concept of time seemed to have stealthily faded away in the lightless bottom of the dragon transformation pool. At a certain spot within this darkness was a figure covered in thick layers of black viscous water. The water was like sludge and tightly wrapped around the figure such that one was barely able to see the silhouette of a human within. Endless black energy continued to pour in from all around, yet the interior of the sludge remained completely still. This silent infusion continued for an unknown amount of time until a certain moment when the sludge finally trembled all of a sudden. A pair of flickering black eyes appeared within it. Lindong opened his eyes as he let out a soft sigh in his heart. He should have already been in this dragon transformation pool for over half a month. Unfortunately, ever since his bones were reconstructed and transformed into top-grade dragon bones, the dragon bones within his body continued to remain at the top-grade level regardless of how much energy he absorbed from this dragon transformation pool. He was clearly still unable to reach that so-called ancient dragon bone level. No wonder the ancient dragon bone is so rare in the dragon tribe, Lindong bitterly smiled. He finally understood just how difficult it was for the ancient dragon bone to appear. No wonder only an individual like Elder Qingxi possessed it. I believe this ancient dragon bone is not something that one can gain by simply absorbing the energy within the dragon transformation pool. Yang's opinion sounded while Lindong felt a little helpless. The former had been paying attention to Lindong's transformation during this period of time. By relying on the overbearing devouring power of the devouring ancestral symbol, Lindong was able to swallow the energy within the dragon transformation pool like a whale. However, other than Lindong's metal-like black bones becoming darker, there were no other changes. Clearly, the reason was not because he had absorbed an insufficient amount of energy. Oh? Have you discovered something? Lindong gradually calmed down and inquired in his mind. Yang was after all an old fox, and there were many aspects in which Lindong could not compare to him. According to what the dragon tribe has said, the experts who successfully managed to obtain the ancient dragon bone did not know exactly what happened in that moment when they obtained the dragon bone. Moreover, I am also not very familiar with the so-called dragon bone of the dragon tribe. Yang's tone was flat. He paused for a moment before continuing. However, my master back then had once seen this ancient dragon transformation pool. Back then, he said that true strength was not simply the strength of one's physical body. Not simply the strength of one's physical body. Lin Dong frowned slightly and mused for a moment. The words of the symbol ancestor were not overly deep. Besides training one's physical body, there was another path, mental energy. Could it be that one not only required a powerful physical body but also a certain level of mental energy in order to obtain this ancient dragon bone? I am uncertain. Yang hesitated for a moment before replying. Lin Dong nodded. He was quiet for a long time before he suddenly gritted his teeth. A thought passed through his mind and a sliver of mental energy surged out from his Niwen palace. Sizzle sizzle. However, the surrounding black pool water surged over the moment this wisp of mental energy was emitted. Traces of black energy adhered to it and an ear-piercing sound was emitted. Pain. An intense pain, which was even clearer than the previous breaking down of his bones, crazily surged into Lin Dong's mind when the ear-piercing sound was emitted, causing veins of blood to rise within his eyes. Lin Dong's fists were tightly clenched and his fingernails had even pierced into the flesh of his palm. A determined expression flashed across Lin Dong's eyes as he took a deep breath a moment later. Bang! As Lin Dong fiercely gritted his teeth, surging mental energy swept out from his Niwen palace like floodwaters. The surrounding water seemed to boil as this surging mental energy gushed out. It crazily adhered to every single bit of mental energy, mercilessly cutting Lin Dong's boundless mental energy like sharp blades. A maddening intense pain rushed into Lin Dong's mind. This indescribable intense pain caused several bulging green veins to emerge on Lin Dong's face. As the intense pain surged into Lin Dong's mind like a flood, the giddiness within his head continued to accumulate. To his horror, he could feel his consciousness gradually diminishing. The intense pain created by this mental energy was even more intense compared to the breaking down of his bones from earlier. It was no wonder that those from the dragon tribe, who entered this place, firmly guarded their physical body and did not dare to allow their mental energy to seep out. Yang. Yang. Lin Dong's consciousness was a blur. He used his final bit of clear-headedness to urgently cry out within his mind. However, Yang's voice had completely disappeared this time. It was as though Yang had been isolated from him. Damn it! Lin Dong cursed in his heart. However, with his consciousness gradually disappearing, he could feel that he had lost control of his body. Will I fail in such a manner? Lin Dong muttered deep within his heart as his consciousness was lost. His consciousness had finally descended into darkness. Amidst this darkness, Lin Dong could vaguely feel his consciousness continuously sinking as water moved around him. There was no concept of time here. Hence, in his fuzzy state of mind, Lin Dong did not know how long he sunk in this darkness. The only thing he could do was firmly guard his last thread of consciousness while floating in this darkness. Although that trace of consciousness appeared like a small boat within a raging storm, Lin Dong was aware that if he lost this final bit consciousness, he would never be able to recover again. Nevertheless, it was clearly not easy to guard this trace of consciousness amidst this endless deep darkness. Even though Lin Dong was tenacious, his last bit of consciousness was slowly being eroded as time seemed to flow by year by year. Really, am I going to die here? A mumbling voice was emitted from the depths of Lin Dong's consciousness. That trace of consciousness seemed to be like a firefly that was emitting its final light before disappearing. However, the trace of consciousness that belonged to Lin Dong was about to vanish when a light figure suddenly appeared before him. It belonged to a slim young lady. The young lady had icy blue long hair and her eyes were completely ice cold. However, those extremely icy eyes were currently filled with anxiety. Soon after, a voice seemed to drift over from an extremely distant place. You promised me you won't die. The beautiful face gradually lost its young and inexperienced look from before, revealing a pretty appearance that could make all living things go crazy. It was Ying Huan Huan. You promised me. You won't die. You won't die. The young lady's anxious cry penetrated the tremendous time and space between them and entered Lin Dong's blurry consciousness. It was akin to a huge stone being thrown into deathly still water, suddenly stirring many ripples. Huan Huan. That consciousness which was about to vanish seemed to awaken at this moment, while the deep darkness also began to crack an inch at a time like a crystal. Lin Dong suddenly opened his eyes as control of his body once again returned to him. Just as he was about to flee, his eyes looked at the scene around him and abruptly froze. What is this place? Lin Dong mumbled to himself. Shock was revealed in his eyes as they observed the surroundings. Presently, he was within a huge hall. Many figures were seated within, but the blood and flesh of these figures had already turned to nothingness. Only black skeletons remained seated like rocks. However, a vast, mighty and calm energy faintly emanated from them. This place was just like a burial ground. The scene was shifted from the mysterious burial ground where Lin Dong was present to a distant quiet ice mountain within the Dao sect in the eastern Xian region. A young lady was silently seated on an ice lotus on that same ice lake. Her tightly shut eyes suddenly opened at this moment as a frightened expression flashed across her originally cold and emotionless face. Her slim jade-like hand gently covered her chest as she felt a piercing pain. Although she did not know what had happened, she was clearly aware that she had just seen that familiar figure. Moreover, he was obviously facing a critical life and death situation. "You promised me you will not die." The young lady's hand was slowly clenched as she softly muttered to herself. Swoosh! A rushing wind sound was suddenly transmitted from a great distance away. Soon after, a figure landed on the ice lake. Ying Xiaoxiao looked at the dazed young lady and hurriedly stepped forward as she asked, Huan, what is it?" "Elder sister, I just saw him." Ying Huan stared at Ying Xiaoxiao with icy eyes and said. Ying Xiaoxiao was startled. She asked in surprise, "He has returned?" "I saw him here." Ying Huan shook her head. Her finger was pointing at her heart. Ying Xiaoxiao bitterly smiled. She merely thought of it as this lass missing a certain person far too much. Hence, she comforted her. Soon after, she sighed again. Her expression appeared exceptionally grave as she said, "I have received some news recently. It seems that there is some unusual activity within Yuan Gate." Ying Huan slightly knitted her brow. Ying Xiaoxiao could clearly sense the surrounding chilly air suddenly become much colder when the former heard the name Yuan Gate. "Father has said that Yuan Gate is likely planning on starting a war." Ying Xiaoxiao clenched her hand tightly. "Start a war, huh?" Ying Huan's pretty face did not show even the slightest ripple after hearing this shocking news. Soon after, an ice mountain-like arc appeared from the corners of her mouth. "Let them start it." Ying Huan slowly inhaled a breath of chilly air. It could be seen from her eyes that she seemed to have made a certain decision as she suddenly stood up and directly walked away from the ice lake. "Elder sister, I will need to leave Dao sect for a period of time." Ying Xiaoxiao looked at Ying Huan's back and hastily asked, "Why?" Ying Huan paused. White cold chi spread from within her body. It froze her body into an ice statue, and a split second later, the ice statue shattered and her body strangely disappeared. "I am going to take back something that belongs to me." The young lady's calm voice reverberated over the ice lake as her body mysteriously disappeared. It was completely silent in this large ancient hall, which was covered by dust that had accumulated over the years. Lin Dong was startled as he stared at the many black skeletons. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. After all, he never expected that there would actually be such a mysterious place located within the dragon transformation pool. "It seems like this place is the key to obtaining an ancient dragon bone," Yang's startled voice sounded at this moment. Lin Dong nodded. This bone burial site was hidden within the dragon transformation pool, and one would have to use one's mental energy in order to locate it. However, it was clearly foolish and dangerous to release one's mental energy in a place like that. In fact, despite Lin Dong's tough and tenacious character, he had nearly sunk into the darkness and completely became part of the energy within the dragon transformation pool. Only those who possess massive guts and were able to block the erosion from the sinking darkness would finally be able to arrive at this place and obtain the opportunity to gain an ancient dragon bone. Previously, Lin Dong's eyes flashed. "I? That little girlfriend of yours, Ying Huan, helped you?" Yang said. "How did she do it?" Lin Dong was at a loss for words. How could Ying Huan detect his current state from the extremely distant eastern Xian region? Moreover, she had even showed up to lend him a hand. She is naturally able to sense it since her heart is there. Yang's voice had an additional tinge of mystery at this moment. However, I will have to remind you that since she is able to perform such a feat, it is likely that the reincarnated soul within her body has already awakened and begun to merge with her body. Otherwise, she will not possess that ability. Lin Dong suddenly clenched his hand. When he was sinking into the darkness, he was still able to see the young lady's icy blue long hair. It was the same sight as when he first saw Ying Huan made contact with the reincarnated soul. Her pretty and pampered self from back then no longer existed. Only a foreign, icy mountain-like chillness was present. I should settle the problem in front of me first. Lin Dong inhaled a deep breath of air and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. Soon after, he lifted his head and looked at the bone burial hall in front of him. A glint of perseverance flashed across his eyes. He had to become very powerful. Therefore, he must obtain an ancient dragon bone. Lin Dong lifted his feet and slowly advanced. The soft sound of footsteps reverberated across this large quiet hall. Many black skeletons were seated quietly within the large hall and there were no signs of life from them. However, it was still possible to detect a frightening strength surging from them. Even after a long time, one must not underestimate these skeletons. These bones are all top-grade dragon bones. Lin Dong could tell that the dragon bones here were all of the same color as those within his body. Clearly, these dragon bones were all top-grade bones. Moreover, as Lin Dong advanced further, the color on those skeletons also grew increasingly darker. This discovery caused Lin Dong's heart to pound, while excitement rose from deep within his eyes. He quickly increased his pace and walked across the hall. Then, he suddenly stopped. Meanwhile, his breathing also became a little more ragged. Lin Dong's footsteps came to a halt. His face was accompanied by shock as he looked in front of him. At that spot were 8 bronze platforms. At the moment, there was a skeleton seated on each bronze platform. These 8 skeletons were not black. Instead, they were of a dark golden color. Dark golden light flowed over the 8 skeletons. This was a golden light that could not be removed even with the passage of time. An indescribable pressure quietly radiated from the skeletons and enveloped the entire bone burial hall. Lin Dong's lips were a little dry as he looked at the 8 dark golden skeletons. The strength of these dragon bones clearly far surpassed that of those top-grade dragon bones from before. Clearly, these 8 dragon skeletons were the legendary ancient dragon bones. Moreover, there were 4 other bronze platforms beside these 8 bronze platforms. However, there were somewhat darker skeletons seated on those 4 platforms. The strength that they contained was far inferior to that of the 8 ancient dragon bones. Nevertheless, the most surprising thing was that they were still able to hold their positions. The strength within these 4 ancient dragon bones have already been absorbed by others. Yang's eyes were sharp and he managed to uncover some clues at the first glance. Lin Dong was startled. Promptly, he quickly fell into deep thought. Could it be that in order to obtain the ancient dragon bone, one must absorb the strength within the ancient dragon bone in order to further strengthen the dragon bones in one's body? That should be the case. Moreover, even if the energy within these ancient dragon bones were absorbed, the skeletons would not turn into dust. Instead, they will continue to quietly absorb the energy from the dragon transformation pool. Perhaps, they will once again turn back into ancient dragon bones in the future. Yang explained. I see. Lin Dong came to a sudden comprehension. In that case, wouldn't it imply that the number of ancient dragon bones here would grow with time? Lin Dong quietly mocked himself when he thought of this. Judging from the looks of the 4 skeletons by the side, it seems like it take an extremely long time before they become ancient dragon bones again. There are actually 12 ancient dragon bones here. It seems like the dragon tribe has produced some powerful individuals over the years. Lin Dong smacked his lips together and spoke in surprise. Typically speaking, most dragon tribe experts that possess ancient dragon bones have reached the reincarnation stage. In other words, the 8 ancient dragon bones in front of him implied 8 reincarnation stage experts. This lineup was truly terrifying. After all, the dragon tribe is a tribe that has existed since the ancient times. There is nothing shocking about the fact that they possess such a solid foundation. Yang was not surprised at all. He paused for a moment before returning to the main topic. Although we have found the ancient dragon bones, it does not mean that you have succeeded. Not only do these ancient dragon bones contain extremely vast and mighty energy, but their will from when they were alive are also hidden in these skeletons. If you are careless, not only would you fail to absorb the energy, but your consciousness might end up being destroyed by their powerful will. Lin Dong was not surprised when he heard this. After all, if it was an easy feat to obtain these ancient dragon bones, such bones wouldn't be this rare. I am already here. Even if it is fraught with danger, I will still give it a try. Lin Dong parted his lips into a smile. He immediately took a step forward and stood in front of a dark golden skeleton. His eyes were searing hot as he stared at that dark golden skeleton. This skeleton was seated, with a golden light flowing over its surface. Its metallic-like indestructible body was not straight. Instead, it was bent slightly and even its head was lowered slightly. It looked as though it was worshipping something. Worship? Lin Dong suddenly narrowed his eyes. Tilting his head, he looked at the tens of thousands of black skeletons buried in this place. All of these skeletons were seated quietly. However, if one was to look carefully, one would realize that their demeanor were exactly the same as that of the dark golden skeletons. However, the direction in which they were worshipping was the 8 dark golden skeletons seated on bronze platforms. However, why was it that these dark golden skeletons were also adopting a worshipping stance? Lin Dong turned his eyes towards the remaining 7 dark golden skeletons and discovered that they also seemed to have the same stance. This discovery caused his eyes to flicker. A moment later, he suddenly took a step back and turned around. His eyes looked in the direction where the 8 dark golden skeletons were facing. There was a huge pillar at that spot, and that pillar was made of a unique material. It was neither gold nor wood. Moreover, there were also various huge flying dragon drawings all over it. Such a pillar was quite common in this large hall, and Lin Dong had seen many of them along the way. However, only this pillar alone caused Lin Dong's heart to palpitate. Lin Dong, look at the top of the pillar. Yang's startled voice suddenly sounded. Swoosh! Lin Dong lifted his head before his sharp eyes turned towards the top of the 10,000 feet tall pillar. There, one could vaguely see a figure present at the peak. Is that? Lin Dong's pupils shrunk. His toes pressed on the ground before his body shot upwards. Within a short couple of breaths' time, he had already reached the top of the pillar. Lin Dong suddenly felt his body sinking just as he was about to reach the top of the pillar, and even his knees bent slightly. If he had not hurriedly stabilized his body, it was likely that he would have knelt down immediately. Nonetheless, it still caused Lin Dong's heart to be in shock. There was a familiar dragon tribe's pressure in this place. However, the pressure this time around was so frightening that it exceeded that of everyone whom he had met before. Even Elder Qingji. Lin Dong slowly lifted his head while feeling shocked in his heart. Then, he saw a lotus stone platform a short distance in front of him. There was a figure seated on the stone platform at the moment. The figure appeared fairly skinny. The dark golden luster, which appeared strangely powerful, was absent on his body. At a first glance, this skeleton appeared just like the most precious jade in the world. It was crystal clear, and if one was to observe carefully, it was even possible to see traces of jade meridians within the bones. This jade skeleton could only be described by the word perfect. Lin Dong's mind involuntarily became absent-minded upon seeing it. However, he quickly recovered his senses. His heart was in shock as he asked, "Whose skeleton is this? Why does it possess such frightening pressure?" A storm brewed within Lin Dong's heart at this moment. From what Yuan Qian had mentioned, the strongest dragon bone in the dragon tribe should be the ancient dragon bone. Yet, this perfect jade skeleton in front of him had clearly far surpassed the other 8 dark golden ancient dragon bones. With shock in his heart, Lin Dong shifted his attention downwards. Subsequently, he discovered that there were 6 crystal-clear fingers on both hands of that jade skeleton. Is that? Yang's surprised voice suddenly sounded. 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor? 6-finger Sage Dragon Emperor? Lin Dong was startled. He felt that this name was extremely domineering. Then, he carefully asked, who is he? Someone who once unified the entire demonic beast world. Lin Dong's pupils shrunk immediately. This episode ends here.